Hi guys, welcome to Relationship Stories with TaleTime. The first story is titled, Wife Asked Me to Open Up Our Relationship, but she ends up with deep regrets a year later and loses everything. The story starts like this. My wife Rachel and I had been happily married for 5 years. Our relationship was really strong, we trusted and supported each other through thick and thin. We had amazing chemistry and a deep emotional bond. I thought things were going perfectly. Then one night over dinner, Rachel dropped a bombshell. Hey babe, I've been thinking, what if we opened up our relationship? I must have looked as shocked as I felt, because she quickly followed with hear me out. I'm not saying we should see other people behind each other's back or anything. I mean, like, an open and honest non-monogamous thing where we can safely explore with other partners. I'll admit, I was extremely hesitant at first. The idea of my wife being intimate with other men made me feel sick to my stomach. But Rachel kept trying to sell me on it over the next few weeks. Don't you think it would be fun and exciting to experience that novelty together? She argued one night while we were curled up watching a movie. So many couples say it actually brings them closer when they don't have to secretly lust after other people. She made it sound so appealing, this bold, adventurous exploration of our sexuality and desires, but as a united front. Rachel could be incredibly persuasive when she set her mind to something. Little by little, she wore me down. Of course, we established very clear rules and boundaries if we were actually going to try this. No running off and having secret affairs, complete honesty about who we were seeing. Safe sex practices at all times. And neither of us could revoke the open relationship instantly if we felt uncomfortable. Most importantly, Rachel and I vowed that our marriage would always remain the primary relationship. No matter how exciting this little experiment got, she and I were the priority. Nothing could compromise the profound love and trust we had in each other. At least, that's what I thought at the time. Little did I know, opening our marriage would turn into a nightmare that would nearly destroy me. Looking back, the shift in our relationship started virtually overnight. As soon as we agreed to open up the marriage, Rachel wasted no time in downloading all the dating apps and setting up profiles. She was clearly very excited about the prospect of experiencing new sexual partners. Me? I was much more hesitant and moved slower. Don't get me wrong, the idea of having casual flings and hookups again held a certain appeal after years of monogamy. But I wasn't nearly as gung-ho about it as Rachel. This was mainly her idea that I had gone along with. Within a week, Rachel was going on multiple dates. She spent hours every night swiping on profiles, dressing up in skimpy outfits and primping herself before heading out to meet another match from Tinder or Bumble. More often than not, she wouldn't return until early the next morning. The first few times it happened, she would come back to our bedroom, wake me up and regale me with all the steamy details of her latest conquest. Part of me found it kind of hot at first. But another part felt jealous pangs when she described how unbelievably amazing some guy was in bed compared to me. Meanwhile, it took me almost a month before I finally worked up the nerve to start dating other people myself. I went on a couple of awkward dates, and ended up sleeping with 2 different women. The experiences were enjoyable enough but felt empty. Like they were missing the deeper intimacy I shared with Rachel. When I tried describing my stories to Rachel with the same enthusiasm she had, she didn't seem nearly as excited or interested to hear about my exploits. She would nod blankly or change the subject. In contrast, I was an extremely captive audience anytime she wanted to revel in the details of her latest sexcapade. As the weeks and months went by, Rachel's behavior only grew more distant and disconnected from me. Sure, we still lived in the same house and slept in the same bed on the nights she actually came home. But it started to feel like I was just her faithful little doormat waiting around whenever she had time for me between her parade of dates and hookups. We stopped doing any of the normal couple things we used to enjoy together, going out to dinner, cuddling on the couch watching movies, or even just having long intimate conversations. Rachel was always distracted, with one eye on her phone waiting for the next guy to message her. Meanwhile, my own attempts to keep up and schedule dates myself slowed to a trickle. What was the point? None of those shallow, casual encounters were able to fill the emotional intimacy void that was growing between me and my wife. It didn't take long before I realized the sad truth. Rachel had essentially checked out of our marriage. She was addicted to the novelty and validation of constant new sexual partners. All the rules and boundaries we had agreed to went out the window. I felt utterly replaced and marginalized in my own damn marriage. The woman I loved was still physically present, but her heart and mind were seemingly everywhere else. No matter how many times I tried communicating how abandoned I felt or suggested we put limits on how much time was spent dating others, Rachel just waved it off. She was too drunk on the ability to succumb to her every impulse and lust for new experiences with randos from dating apps. Don't be so possessive and insecure, she dismissively told me one night after I gathered the courage to speak up again. That's not very sexy. That cut me deeply. I had been the one to compromise my monogamous ideals in the first place because Rachel begged me to try this open relationship. Now, my committed and devoted husband behavior was being punished as an unsexy turnoff. I felt increasingly emasculated and like a pitiful schmuck. As the weeks turned into months, the secure harbor of my marriage became utterly unrecognizable. How could Rachel possibly claim this was bringing us closer together? I felt like I was being slowly erased. If I thought Rachel's behavior was bad before, it reached truly nightmarish levels when she met Adam. Looking back now, he was the beginning of the end for our marriage. Adam was some finance bro she matched with on Hinge. From the moment they first started dating, Rachel became utterly obsessed and infatuated with him. She couldn't stop talking about how smart, successful, and amazing in bed he was. The long-winded gushing stories made me feel even more pathetic and inadequate than usual. Within a matter of weeks, she was spending every single night at Adam's slick downtown apartment. Entire weekends would go by without me seeing her at all. Whenever I tried calling or texting to make plans, she was always too busy or would outright ignore me for hours. Our once passionate sex life was reduced to Rachel begrudgingly penciling me in for the occasional pity starfish when she had a spare hour between her trysts with Adam. I definitely wasn't getting any enthusiasm or passion from her during those humiliating instances. Her mind was clearly elsewhere the whole time. During this period, Rachel's lies and deceptions became more blatant and couldn't be ignored. She started making up feeble excuses about having to work late or helping a friend move whenever I questioned her constant absence and shady behavior. When I finally proved she was lying about her whereabouts, she would lazily admit, "Okay, fine, I was with Adam. What's the big deal?" Like her interest in me had been completely abandoned in favor of parading around her shiny new boyfriend. The rules about complete honesty were wholly disregarded at this point. I should have seen the truth. This open relationship had just become an excuse for Rachel to brazenly cheat without any guilt. One night, after another fruitless argument where she dismissed my concerns about her selfish behavior, I finally decided to take action. While Rachel was off with Adam yet again, I logged into her email and dating app accounts, desperate for answers. What I found was even more staggering and painful than I could have imagined. Page after page of incriminating messages and conversations clearly proved that Rachel had been constantly deceiving and breaking every single rule we had agreed to about being open and ethical with other partners. She threw away the stipulations about protection and regularly had unprotected sex with multiple partners, putting my health at risk. Message threads with dozens of guys showed she had been arranging secret hookups and affairs for months now, completely violating the honesty and transparency guidelines. More nauseating, I uncovered lengthy sexts and messages where she trashed me to Adam and other men as a pathetic beta witch and bragged about how easy I was to manipulate and control. There was even a lengthy conversation trying to strategize ways she could take the house and other assets in our eventual divorce. Reading through the evidence was utterly crushing. All of my worst fears about being betrayed, emasculated and taken advantage of were true. In her mind, our open relationship was just a comfortable fiction that allowed Rachel to live out her fantasies of being a selfish hot wife who could treat me like a pathetic cuckold without any consequence. My stomach was in knots as I forced myself to keep reading everything. The more I uncovered, the sicker I felt. Here was the woman I loved and trusted completely, conspiring to destroy me in the most humiliating way possible while flaunting her new sexual conquests in my face. I felt like I might actually vomit. Even worse, it seemed like her new plaything Adam was a key architect in her deceitful schemes to cheat and take advantage of our open situation. He constantly egged her on to keep up the deceptions and not let me find out about their relationship getting more serious. From what I could gather, Adam clearly got an ego boost out of being the man on the side. By the time Rachel finally came home around 3 a.m., my feelings had shifted from anguish and devastation to a slow-burning rage. How dare she treat me with such cruel disrespect after everything I had sacrificed for her and our marriage? When she tried sneaking into the bedroom, I was waiting, sitting upright with the lights on and her loathsome betrayals laid bare in front of me via printed out emails, texts, and dating app messages. "We need to talk. Now," I stated in a low, controlled voice when she froze upon seeing the evidence. To her credit, Rachel didn't even try denying anything after briefly glancing at the damning information. She simply tensed her jaw and crossed her arms with a defiant look. "Well, it looks like you found out. Are you satisfied now?" She spat out cuttingly. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you anything. I knew you'd overreact and make things into a huge drama." My mouth hung open in disbelief. She was actually attempting to blame me and make herself the victim? After systematically lying, cheating, and conspiring to ruin me behind my back? The audacity was sickening. Overreact? "Rachel, you violated every single boundary and ounce of trust we had," I shouted, losing my composure. You lied to my face for months, put my health at risk, and worst of all, you've been scheming to take everything from me this whole time with that loser Adam." Finally, a flicker of shame flashed across her face before the defiant mask went back up. "Don't act so shocked. You agreed to an open relationship just like I wanted," she countered. "I'm simply taking advantage of the situation, the way any smart, empowered woman would." I could feel storm clouds of rage billowing in my mind as she attempted to rewrite history and justify her sickening deceptions. This wasn't the open relationship I had reluctantly agreed to at all. My wife had transformed into someone unrecognizably selfish and cruel. "We're done," I stated, surprising myself with how calm I was able to say it. "Our marriage, this pathetic open situation, all of it is over. I want you out of my house by tomorrow night." For the first time, a look of panic enveloped Rachel's features as she seemed to realize I was serious. What? You can't kick me out," she sputtered. "I'm your wife. We had an agreement about this open relationship, remember?" I laughed humorlessly. "Whatever agreement we had, you shredded it into pieces when you decided to have affairs and actively scheme against me. Did you forget about that part?" Well, I never agreed to get divorced," she fired back. "We can work through this. Or at least take some time apart." I shook my head adamantly. "The only way this is getting worked through is with lawyers. I'm filing for divorce and you're not getting a penny or this house we own together." A look of pure incredulousness and outrage twisted Rachel's features as the reality hit her. "You're bluffing. You think a judge will let you keep everything after we had an open relationship?" Without responding, I simply pulled out my phone and showed her the calendar appointment for the consultation I had booked with a top divorce attorney for the next morning. I had been secretly preparing for this eventuality ever since uncovering her betrayals. She opened her mouth to respond, but seemingly thought beher of it as she watched me calmly tapping out a request for a police escort in case she refused to leave soon. Eventually, Rachel's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Fine, I'll start packing," she mumbled, quickly darting out of the bedroom. True to her word, Rachel spent the next day slowly packing up a sad collection of belongings into boxes and suitcases. I watched unswayed as she continuously shot me pleading, sorrowful looks in between, clearly hoping I'd give in and let her stay. By nightfall, she had loaded up her car and was preparing to leave. I said nothing, simply staring through the window with my arms crossed as she paused before me one last time. "I'll be staying with Adam for now," Rachel muttered with red-rimmed eyes, searching my stoic expression for any last shred of sympathy or affection. "Please don't do anything rash with the lawyers yet, okay? We can work something out, I know we can." I remained silent until she had turned away in defeat, trudging out the door and driving off into the night with Adam. Her desperate pleas echoed uselessly. The next morning, I met with the attorney and we began mapping out an aggressive strategy to separate all assets and finances. I would not be the heartbroken fool for 1 second longer. With Rachel out of the house, I felt an incredible weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in over a year, I could actually breathe again without the constant anxiety and dread of her betrayals consuming me. Of course, the road ahead was still long and arduous. My attorney warned me that Rachel would undoubtedly claim our open marriage agreement entitled her to a significant share of our assets like the house, retirement funds, and other property. I needed to brace for an ugly legal battle. Thankfully, I had assembled an ironclad case to position myself for the most favorable outcome possible. In addition to the reams of email, text and dating app evidence exposing Rachel's serial infidelities, I also got copies of her conversations explicitly strategizing to take everything from me once we separated. I'll never forget the look of disbelief on my attorney's face as he pored over the transcripts detailing how Rachel had played me for a fool while cheating behind my back. More than once he shook his head in disgust at her sociopathic monologues branding me as a spineless pay pig and other vile misogynistic insults. "With evidence like this, we can absolutely nail her to the wall for cheating and separate all your assets cleanly," he assured me. "This so-called open relationship appears to have been premeditated fraud to take advantage of you from the beginning." My lawyer's confidence helped ease my mind, but I still felt a pit of dread whenever I was served updates about Rachel's demands. True to form, she was claiming that since I had willingly agreed to an open relationship, I had no grounds to claim infidelity or miss out on any marital assets. Her legal team even had the audacity to try painting me as some sort of abusive, controlling partner who forced her into sexually exploring. I could only scoff at the blatantly ridiculous fabrications Rachel's camp tried peddling. All of my text messages, emails, and other documentation clearly proved it was her idea and incessant pressure that pushed me into going along with the open situation. Every rule and boundary around other partners was established because of my insistence on guidelines. Time after time, Rachel had methodically violated and disregarded my stated wishes in pursuit of her own selfish pleasures with multiple affair partners. If one of us was portraying controlling and abusive behavior, it certainly wasn't me based on the evidence. As the divorce proceedings dragged on over months, Rachel grew increasingly desperate and unhinged. Because Adam was essentially a freeloader who contributed nothing, her lawyer fees were skyrocketing and she was burning through what little money and assets she still had access to. It was actually kind of darkly amusing the few times we wound up attending the same courts or mediations. Rachel would shoot me these absolutely venomous looks, clearly dismayed at how calm and unbothered I was able to remain after her months of torture. I'm sure she expected to see a sniveling, broken shadow of a man rendered bankrupt from the proceedings, not someone who had efficiently insulated himself. When her smug new boy toy Adam would strut into the courthouse trying to play families, I couldn't help but notice how his overly carefree facade would drop just slightly. Like he was quietly dreading how much this protracted legal situation was draining what little funds and belongings they had left. At one point, Rachel's lawyer attempted blustering me into an unfavorable settlement by claiming she would easily sway the judge into viewing our open relationship as overt permission to have affairs consequence-free, therefore entitling her to at least half of everything, if not more. You might want to rethink that strategy, my attorney calmly rebuked, before sliding across printouts of our text conversations where Rachel's true intentions were laid bare. I'll never forget the ashen, crestfallen expression on Rachel's face once she finally laid eyes upon those damning evidences of her malice and premeditated deceptions being used against her. In that moment, I think she realized just how badly she had underestimated and screwed herself over. In the end, the settlement bore everything out in my favor as the blatantly wronged party. The judge agreed there was no wiggle room for Rachel's actions to be excused or justified under her farcical claims about permission through our open relationship. Her affairs, conspiracies to deprive me of assets, and general betrayals of trust disqualified any claim she tried arguing. I kept the house, the investments, the cars, virtually all the assets Rachel had arrogantly assumed would be hers. She was awarded virtually nothing beyond a small amount to cover short-term living expenses while she got back on her feet. When the gavel hit, I felt an immense surge of cathartic relief and validation. After everything Rachel had carelessly put me through over the past year, she was finally facing undeniable consequences. No more gaslighting me or trying to rewrite history to justify her cruelty. It was all laid bare as me being the faithful partner while she had been the deceptive, malicious leech. I didn't even stick around to make eye contact with Rachel as she exited the courtroom weeping with her tail tucked firmly between her legs. No misplaced brave front or quivering last-ditch attempts at begging me to reconsider our settlement. She had rolled the dice banking on defrauding me and heartlessly lost. I simply wanted that miserable chapter of my life to be over with so I could move on and heal from the trauma she inflicted. Let Rachel retreat to the cold, hard reality she deserved to wallow in, completely emptied out and abandoned, just like she had left me. As I sat alone in my home that evening, the home I had successfully kept while Rachel got virtually nothing, I spent time reflecting on the tumultuous experience and mind-boggling awakening I had gone through. Just a little over a year ago, I had been absolutely convinced Rachel was my soulmate and we would be deliriously happy growing old together. I loved and trusted her with every fiber of my being, which made her despicable betrayals and deceptions feel so excruciatingly painful. But as the weeks and months passed by in the aftermath of our separation and divorce battle, I came to realize her horrific transformation was a blessing in disguise. Because if Rachel had been capable of exploiting my trust and commitment so mercilessly, just for selfish pleasures and ego boosts, then she never truly loved me unconditionally in the first place. The woman I thought was my forever partner had become toxic and poisonous to the core. Her willingness to not only cheat repeatedly, but to go as far as conspiring to deprive me of everything while mocking me as a pay pig, exposed her as being someone downright sociopathic. I shudder to think about the psychological torture and spiritual anguish Rachel could have continued putting me through if we'd remained together. At least now I was free and could begin healing, both mentally and financially after securing such a favorable divorce settlement. While the road to overcoming the PTSD and trust issues would surely be long, I tried focusing on the positives. An incredible weight of anxiety had been lifted, allowing me to breathe and focus on myself for the first time in ages. My hard-won money, assets and house were all secure for me to enjoy in peace. Most importantly, I would eventually be able to open my heart again to someone deserving, someone who would cherish the loyalty and good-natured spirit Rachel had taken for granted. The past year of torment reaffirmed how badly I craved being in a committed partnership rooted in real intimacy, trust and teamwork. Not these narcissistic power mind games and farcical open situations where one partner uses it as a flimsy excuse to commit overt infidelity while disregarding the other's needs. I deserve to be appreciated and have my boundaries respected instead of trampled over. Finding that eventual someone would surely be easier now that the rot of a toxic partner had been surgically excised from my life. I could start fresh with rebuilding my self-esteem on my own terms instead of constantly being gaslit and undermined. Still, the experience had imparted me with invaluable lessons about being more discerning and not ignoring red flags simply because you love someone. People can masterfully hide their true colors when it benefits them, no matter how convincingly they love bomb you at first. More importantly, I learned to never ignore my instincts or boundaries just to appease someone else's selfish whims again, no matter how initially harmless they might try portraying it. Because unrepentant people will inevitably show you their real selves through patterns of unacceptable behavior if you give them enough rope. Rachel had hung herself by her own noose of entitlement and cruelty. I could finally move forward completely unshackled from her toxicity. While the road ahead contained uncertainties, I greeted them with a newfound sense of solace, wisdom and optimism about the universe's ability to course correct when you stick to your values. I knew the perfect partner was out there for me somewhere, someone who would cherish open communication, loyalty and viewing our relationship as a team effort. Not a tool for one-sided exploitation. I just had to keep putting in the work to heal and become the type of loving yet self-respecting man worthy of that mutual adoration. After the hellish depths Rachel forced me through, I deserved someone who would be thrilled to meet me at the height of where I was heading. The future was finally unobstructed and ripe with possibilities. Update. It's been a little over a year since my nightmare divorce from Rachel finally concluded. Looking back, I'm just so grateful to have extricated the toxic leech from my life for good. In the months after the judge ruled definitively in my favor, Rachel did actually reach out a couple more times trying to reinitiate contact. The messages ran the gamut from thinly veiled pity plays about how she had nowhere to go and learned her lesson to more manipulative love bombing about how we were soulmates and could get past this if I just opened my heart again. I simply ignored and blocked each attempt at reeling me back in. My trust had been obliterated beyond repair by her sociopathic actions and attitudes. There was no coming back from the magnitude of malice and depravity she had unleashed upon me. Thankfully, Rachel seemed to eventually get the message that I was completely unmoved and unwilling to re-engage. The desperate pleas and emotional terrorist tactics stopped, likely once she realized I was serious about closing that chapter forever. As for me, I've spent the past year focusing on rebuilding my self-esteem, rediscovering my core values, and putting the pieces of my life back together after Rachel's torment. It wasn't easy at first. The trauma ran very deep and surfaced in waves of anger, grief, anxiety and crippling trust issues. But by consistently showing up for myself through therapy, physical fitness, and reconnecting with old friends, I've been able to make incremental progress in restoring my mental and emotional fortitude. I'm stronger and more self-assured than ever before. These days, my life is filled with hobbies, activities and relationships that actually nourish my soul instead of starving it. I've taken up rock climbing, founded a guitar group with some neighbors, and even done a bit of traveling to places I'd always dreamed about but never felt deserving enough to go. Most excitingly, I've started dipping my toes back into the dating pool over the past few months. While I'm still feeling a bit gun-shy from the depths of betrayal Rachel inflicted, I've met a few incredible women who have helped restore my faith in finding an honorable partner who values respect and teamwork in a relationship. There's one woman in particular, Jessica, who has especially reawakened those romantic optimisms again. We've been taking things slowly, but she's attentive, communicative and constantly reaffirms how she has zero tolerance for any of the gaslighting or deception tactics Rachel weaponized against me. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I can visualize an idyllic future again. One with genuine intimacy, adventures, maybe a family one day, all the wholesome dreams I had naively hoped for with Rachel before they crashed and burned so spectacularly. While some trust issues still linger and hold me back at times, I'm finally allowing myself to pursue happiness without walking on eggshells. To embrace faith instead of cynicism. Because I realize now that Rachel's grotesque betrayal, despite the immense pain and anguish it caused, was actually a profound gift in unlocking me from that terminal cycle of toxicity and abuse. The relationship was built on her lies and deceptions from the start, and I'm ultimately better off having dodged that bullet for good. These days, I try not to dwell on the darkness too much. When it does resurface, I simply remind myself that Rachel's choices permanently exiled her from my life, the consequences of her own abhorrent value system. My purpose now is focusing on maximizing all the beauty and love that's finally unobstructed before me. I'm with the right people now, starting with me. Wow guys, that was heavy but an incredible story of personal strength and perseverance against narcissistic abuse. I'm so glad the op was able to permanently remove that cancerous ex from their life and come out thriving on the other side. Too often we see stories of people being manipulated into giving remorseless partners like Rachel chance after chance. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you cannot get enough of my content, please subscribe to my channel, like the video and post a comment to support me. I will see you again tomorrow.